So it's a great honor to be here and to be able to talk to the original guy who had a fire on a beach with a bunch of friends 25 years ago. And you know, a lot of us have probably had a bonfire on the beach and a party, and we said, "Hey, let's do this again next year." But there's only one that evolved into a city of 60,000 of the most creative, imaginative, wonderful, interesting, crazy people on the planet, and that's this one. And so my first question to Larry is, how did that happen? What happened? Why did that happen?
Well, I believe it was a radical self-expression. I just called a friend one day and said, "Let's burn a man on the beach," and he said, "Would you repeat that?" And and I did, and when we did, and took our two little sons, and we installed it at the tide line at Baker Beach in San Francisco at twilight one day, and doused it with gasoline because we didn't know any better, and it was just like a second sun brought down to earth. But that really wasn't when Burning Man began. I think it began when everybody on the beach came rushing toward us and surrounded the figure and formed a semicircle, just as you folks here have formed today. And I could see the fire reflected in their eyes. And a woman came running over. The fire was being shunted to one side by the wind, and she took its hand, held it for a moment, and it was that effusion of enthusiasm that inspired us. It was the people and their response to us, to this gift that we had improvised without really thinking. And it was at that moment we decided we'd do it again.
Did you actually envision what's happened now? I mean, what point did you see that this is more than a party? At what point did it become something really, really deep? Because I think everybody here, that's the way they feel it, that's the way they see it. It's changed probably everybody's life who's been here can see a shift in their life from before Burning Man and after Burning Man, from their own virgin burner experience. When did it become that something much deeper?
Well, that vision began to clarify when we came out into this space, and I remember standing alone by the man. There were only about 40 people initially, and I looked around, and the man was this big singularity that seemed to define, the whole universe, and the largest thing in sight, and there were dust devils, like whirlwinds of dust rising at the four corners near the horizon, and it seemed like I was standing at the center of the world, and I remember the thought. I thought to myself, well, those columns of dust are being raised by armies that are converging on this site, and I was the only one who thought that at that time. But it was a vision, and this place summons up visions, and I found it compelling, and indeed, armies have converged on this site. So that's the answer to that.
So, some people think of this as like a Neverland, and actually you've been compared to Peter Pan. And and you've certainly been a Peter Pan character, hero of mine ever since I first came here. But my question to you is this a Neverland and then you go back to the default world and you grow up? Or do you have a completely different vision of what it means to grow up? What does it mean to grow up?
Yeah. We came out here for otherworldly reasons, and in order to persist and build the city, we discovered that we were responsible for thousands of people, and that certainly, at that point, you quit being Peter Pan. And if this were merely an escape from reality, that would be a very depressing fact. People come back and they go back to the default world, which is a funny word because it's as if the source code determines that the world is what it is, and it automatically resets itself. But out here, everyone discovers that they can express what is utterly necessary, feels essential within them, but they can project it out in the world. They can summon up a vision themselves. They can find creators then to make that vision into substance, and they can make their own world, in effect. We made our own world, and all of you are engaged here today making your own world, but you're making it together with others. Now you can go back to the so-called default world and be greeted by an entire community of people around you who have shared that experience. So what's stopping you from what's stopping you from refashioning that world?
We've seen so many examples of that here where people have brought the innovation and new ideas that they've kind of birthed at Burning Man back to the world, and it's just been extraordinary to see that. And so we really want to kind of thank you for giving us a place where we can birth ideas, where however crazy and wild they are. You named or your team named the theme this year, Rites of Passage, and I wondered, is there for you personally, not the event, not the city, but for you personally, is there a rite of passage going on right now for you? And if there is, what is it? Can you tell us about it?
For me personally, well, the themes are meant to be multivalent. That is, as electrons whirl around the center, and layer after layer of meaning. And this is a meaning-saturated environment. That's why synchronicity occurs. And what's my rite of passage? Oh, let's not talk about me. Let's talk about the world. I brought along, just so I remember it, I'd like to cite a quotation by Milton Friedman. Who remembers Milton Friedman? And he's a man who fashioned a strategy that changed American politics greatly over the world. And some decades ago, they said he was founded part of the Chicago School of Economics, and laid down a strategy that was pursued. Following that strategy, that's how the word liberal got to be a bad name. It's how it came to seem that Franklin Delano Roosevelt never existed. That's how it came to seem that we were headed back to the Gilded Age in our politics. And he said, only a crisis, real or imagined, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic mission, to develop alternatives, to keep them alive, available, until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. And I think that's our mission. You go back to that default world people talk about, and it seems implacable, it seems inevitable, it seems like it won't change. But we know, and if you study history, you know that real change is happening in the Middle East right now. And that's because an entire generation there grew up and got educated, couldn't find a job, and started to connect with one another. And it happened overnight. So it looked like the government in Egypt was sitting on all the guns and all the power, and the establishment was well, I mean, how could a single unaided individual do anything about it? Our mission here, as it's emerging, and everyone can feel it here today, is to develop alternatives. A new way of looking at the world. You gain the courage to imagine you could change the world. Now you've gained the human resources by which you might change that world. Now let's work on the ideas that will be lying around when the crisis comes. And the crisis is coming. We're in it. Very interesting times. We're living in a world in which people, well, we've run out of ideas. I noticed that our government is telling us that we should save our money, but spend a lot on consumer items to boost the economy. We're suffering from political paralysis. The political will to change simply doesn't seem to exist. As far as the eye can see, there doesn't seem to be any change in hand or any possibility of it. But I think that it is possible now to begin creating ideas of a lie on the ground. So when, people are in pain right now, or people are losing jobs, it's going to continue. The pain is going to get worse. I hate to say that, but it will get worse. But think about your own lives. Generally, people don't think unless they're in pain. In fact, they end up in a corner. You end up in all of your lives. They're talking about rites of passage. You end up in a corner, and the pain becomes unendurable, and it feels like the world is bearing down on you like some implacably solid object that's going to crush you. And unaided, that leads to trauma. But it doesn't. But it doesn't have to be that way. I think what we have to begin to imagine is a world in which we are not defined by as commodities, is a world in which the human resources around us are available, in which projects can engage us, and just as this project has engaged us for all these years. If you added up all the resources that create Black Rock City, it far exceeds the resources that our organization has brought to bear by a huge factor. I think that right now, it's not. I'm really glad that intellectual discourse is taking place, because when the pain gets worse, people are going to reach for ideas, and if the pain gets so bad and they can't connect with one another, then trauma will occur, and political and terrible things could happen. But on the other hand, as in your own lives, when the pain gets desperate, it gets bad, and you feel desperate, what has changed you? Well, you do the most desperate act. You open your heart. And once you begin to open your heart, then like the man is poised between two pinnacles, then it's possible to step out into nothing, and the earth will rise up to meet your step. And so, what we're doing out here, we face economic challenges, political challenges, but I don't think that any instrumentality of that kind is going to do us any good unless there's cultural change, and that starts. So we need to create a new kind of culture, a new way of being together, and when that happens, then it will be possible to revolutionize the way we live. If we don't do that, and if we can't do that, then we're going to be in trouble. So anyway, rites of passage. Let's see if we can pass over into a new way of being together, and what is unthinkable now will be inevitable.
Larry, you answered my last question, which is why does the world need Burning Man to exist, and how can we make sure it still happens 100 years from now? And I was so thankful for you to be here and share those ideas with us. And I think we all believe in that vision. And you said, can we make it happen? We are all going to work together to make that happen. So thank you, Larry Harvey.